Editor-in-Chief of Education Week and President of Editorial Projects in Education.
Good morning. We've got to get some energy in this room. It sounds a little dead. Welcome to today's Education Week Leadership Forum, Unleashing Technology to Personalize Learning. We're very happy to have you with us today. We recognize it's a big deal that you took time out of your busy, demanding schedules to join us. We have a very full program that we're excited to share with you. Our goal today is to provide you all with insights into how you can use technology to personalize learning and better engage students. Toward that end, we'll hear about strategies for building successful district e-learning programs, tactics for putting social networks to work for you, both in and out of the classroom, customizing district assessments to raise student achievement, among many other topics. In many ways, this forum will bring the pages of Education Week Digital Directions magazine to life. You'll hear from some of the thought leaders and technology trailblazers that we regularly feature in the pages of the magazine. But we don't want this to be a one-way dialogue. We're very much looking forward to the interactive aspect of this event. We encourage you to pose questions you may have for us or any of the speakers during the Q&A periods that will follow each session, and during the lunchtime roundtables. We hope that you'll not only glean some terrific insights, but that you'll also share your experiences and opinions as well. We want to learn about the challenges you face and how you're addressing them so that we can all learn together, and so that you'll leave today with a better roadmap for how to tackle those issues. I'm proud to work with a terrific group of reporters and editors and other folks at Education Week and EPE. You'll hear from some of them today. These are folks who live, breathe, and eat technology. As most of you know, Education Week has been the most respected voice in K-12 education journalism for more than 30 years. What you may not know is how much we're doing in the education technology arena. Not only are we covering ed tech in a bigger way in Education Week, but we're also publishing Digital Directions, the magazine I just mentioned, online and in print, and it's focused on ed tech issues that all superintendents and their CTOs should be debating and discussing. You'll find a copy of our most recent issue in your tote bag. There's also our Digital Directions e-newsletter. We regularly host a bunch of webinars and a variety of EdTech topics. And there's our annual technology report, Technology Counts, which this year will focus on personalized learning. I'd also like to quickly welcome the folks who are joining us virtually on edweek.org. We are live streaming some of today's program, including the opening keynote, our 1:15 panel discussion, and our 3:15 keynote. These sessions will also be archived on edweek.org and available to everyone after this event. So we'll hope that we would love for you to share them with any colleagues you'd like. So why did we decide to go into the business of hosting these live events? The short answer is that we set out a couple years ago to explore whether we could be helpful to the field by convening the nation's leading educators and policymakers and practitioners, which includes folks like you all, to tackle today's most pressing issues. We conducted countless interviews and fielded several surveys, and we got the message loud and clear. Education Week, as an independent, honest broker, could provide an enormous service by bringing folks together to discuss real strategies, real solutions, and real successes. My sincerest hope is that you return to your states, districts, and schools, wherever, with new tools and strategies and perspectives. We at Education Week genuinely believe that lasting school change will only come about when policymakers and educators are armed with the information they need to push for change. That's exactly what our reporting, research efforts, and now these convenings are all about. So, before I introduce the person who will introduce the keynoter, I have a few housekeeping notes. We're offering free Wi-Fi, and you can see on this slide how to access it by selecting Almost Ballroom 2. If you plan to tweet about this event, we encourage you to include the hashtag EdWeekLive. also on the screen. As helpful resources get mentioned during today's event, we'll be posting them, as well as some of the speakers' presentations, at the address shown on the screen now. The restrooms are located at the back of the room on the left. You all need to know that. Now, we'll be in this room for the sessions this morning and this afternoon, but lunch will be served in the dining room upstairs. So when we break for lunch, there'll be some people to help you, whether you go by elevator or up the stairs. There's an evaluation form in your tote bag. We very much appreciate it, very much appreciate getting your input and feedback. We find them extremely helpful as we continue to put on these events. There are power strips in the back if you need to power up your phone or laptop. Although, having just spoken of phones, make sure you've got your ringtone off. The staff of Education Week and Education Week Digital Directions has worked very, very hard on this event, and I hope you've had a chance to meet with some of those folks. But it frankly would not have been possible without the support of our many wonderful sponsors. So let me run through them again on our screen. Our platinum sponsor is the Nellie Mae Education Foundation. Quizdom, which is providing the student response system, and you're going to use these Quizdom Q6 remotes during our panel discussions during the day, is also a sponsor of this event. Our interactive whiteboard sponsor is Polyvision. Be sure to visit the Polyvision booth to enter to win a free Eno whiteboard for your district. They'll be holding a drawing later in the day. Our Gold Plus sponsor is Riverside Publishing. Our Gold sponsor, CTB McGraw-Hill, AT&T, American Institutes for Research, and Compass Learning. Our video VIP sponsor is SAS. And the registration sponsor is Skills Tutor, and today's afternoon refreshments are sponsored by Study Island. So please join me in thanking all our sponsors. Today's focus on using technology to personalize learning is core to the work of the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, today's platinum sponsor. The foundation, which is New England's largest charitable organization, believes that if we are to improve our prospects for the future, we must prepare all learners with the skills and knowledge they need to fully participate in post-secondary education, work, and life. On that note, I'd like to introduce the President and CEO of the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, Nicholas Donohue. Under Nick's leadership, the foundation has launched its focus on student-centered learning to stimulate transformative change in public education. Before joining the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, Nick served as the special master at Hope High School in Providence, Rhode Island. We certainly wrote a lot about Hope High School. Before that, he was Commissioner of Education for the state of New Hampshire. He has previously held positions at Learning Innovations, the Boston Leadership Academy at Boston University, and Citywide Educational Coalition in Boston. Please join me in welcoming Nick Donohue.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ginny. We're very proud at Nellie Mae to be supporting these forums in Ed Week. As you modestly described, Ed Week remains the premier source of information about news and trends in education, so we're very glad to be part of this work. As you described at Nellie Mae, our focus really is about equity and excellence. And the idea is that if we're serious about preparing our society for the future, that means many more learners achieving the skills and knowledge necessary for success, those basic plus skills, if you will. And this led us to some notions around student-centered learning, the idea that learning happens in many places, at many times, with different kinds of agency, and the need to rethink how schooling is organized fundamentally, including but not limited to the use of technology to enrich and expand the learning experience, to expand the notions of classroom and educator that will allow students to flourish and achieve these skills. So this really made sense for us to connect and support this work. We're very interested in learning with this community and the broader community about how to actualize those images of learning and really push ourselves outside of traditional notions about school. So it's appropriate that I introduce the next speaker, given our interest. So I'd like to now introduce Karen Cator, the Director of the Office of Educational Technology at the United States Department of Education. Karen is a strong advocate for making better use of digital tools to personalize learning and raise student achievement. Well known among chief information officers and other ed tech leaders around the country, Karen is now promoting better use of digital tools in learning in the National Education Technology Plan. And I'll say that those of you who have not looked through that plan, I encourage you to. It's a forward-thinking, powerful image of what schooling could look like, not just in the future, but today. That plan is the federal government's blueprint for using technology more effectively in schools. Prior to joining the department last November, Karen was an executive for Apple, Inc., where she was responsible for the company's Distinguished Educator Program, professional development initiatives, and teaching and learning content on the Apple Learning Interchange, an online network where educators share lessons, strategies, and content-based digital media. In her talk this morning, Karen will look at how technology is being used to personalize learning and improve achievement. Then Kevin Bushweller, Executive Director of Education Week Digital Directions, will join her on the stage for a question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming Karen Cator.
Thank you. Fantastic. Good morning. So this is totally supposed to be about personalized learning, so we are going to quickly run through some things and then open it up for discussion. So definitely be thinking about what you want to talk about, take notes, really keep track, because we're not just kidding. We really do want to interact with you. So I am going to see if I can find my clicker. This thing is the clicker. As they say, it's not about technology until the technology doesn't work, and then it's all about the technology. But today it's going to work, so it's not going to be about the technology. As you'll see, the National Education Technology Plan, the big words you can read, even if you can't read the rest of it, is learning. It's definitely a learning plan focused on learning. The total title, Transforming American Education, Learning Powered by Technology, was very purposefully crafted. We are talking about transformation. We've been working on school reform for years and years and years and years, and really now is the time. We have this amazing opportunity, the convergence of several things that are really making it possible to transform what we're doing in teaching and learning. So let me kind of run through this as we go. So I think you've heard President Obama's big goal that by the year 2020 we'll be the top nation per capita in college graduates. So what that means is today we're hovering right around 40%, and we would need to get to 60% of people in the United States with 2-year or 4-year degrees. So, as President Obama says, we need an all-hands-on-deck strategy. So I think it's interesting that today in Washington, D.C., there's 2 other events that I know of. I'm sure there's many others as well. But the 2 I know of, there's a big community college summit happening, because community colleges are actually an incredibly important part of the overall strategy. And we need to think about how to personalize learning at our community colleges. There also is the Partnership for 21st Century Skills Summit. And that's really the big conversation about how to really think about what matters for students today. What do students need to know and be able to do? And how do we measure those things that matter? And then how do we scale that up within our school districts? So both of those, I think, are interesting conversations, coupled with your conversation today about how to truly personalize learning. So the 4 kind of, lots of things happening in the world, but as you know, mobility 24/7. How many people have the full internet in their pocket right now? Okay, how many people don't? No, just kidding. Get enough, raise your hand if you don't. But basically that means you pretty much all have smartphones, something in your pocket that's the full internet. And I will say the country of Denmark has now begun to allow students to use the internet on their high school exit exam. So think about that, and think about how that changes in terms of teaching to the test. So mobility, 24/7 access. Second, all of the different places online, social interactions for learning, the places that people learn together, the places that people learn to cook, learn to fix their stuff in their house, they learn to knit, learn to play guitar, all of the things that you can learn to do online with other people. So it's not I'm all by myself, plugged into something and going through some content someone's shoveling at me, but it's like, who am I, what do I need to know, where am I going to find it, who can I talk to, what is my network for learning? That's something we can definitely leverage in education, and we'll be talking more about that. And then the proliferation of digital content. You all know that. There's tons of stuff, and much of it highly produced. When people think about digital content, sometimes they think about, the cat playing the piano on YouTube or whatever. But a lot of this content are amazing, the Nobel laureates and the physics professors at MIT, and these people who have published just an amazing amount of digital content, which is allowing us that kind of long tail of personalized learning, which we'll talk more about. And then finally, managing the transition from print to online. We'll talk more about this too, but in essence, as we think about a predominantly print-based classroom with textbooks and supplemental materials and teacher's guides and assessments, and then we think over here we have these online courses that today, generalization, a lot of them are for kind of credit recovery, and how do we think about providing students with kind of an individual path for a specific course. What we see is kind of a mashup of these two, these things coming together in a wonderful platform online that can be kind of like if you picture all this stuff that's highly produced from the publishers, bring it into an online platform, open up the binding so you can start sliding things in. Sliding in your videos, your websites, your assignments, your student work, all sorts of things you can start sliding in. So what it does is it creates a really interesting context to what we're doing. Because we know probably the most valuable parts of those things that the teachers have now in this stack of paper is the table of contents. It gives them a sense of kind of scope and sequence, ordering, kind of what do I do next? It keeps them kind of on some kind of track. So we can do that online, but make the richness of what's available in this online platform so much more prevalent. So that's the main thing we're thinking about there. And then the online platforms can begin to become more and more participatory and social. So those are kind of the big drivers, the big context that we're living in. So the plan has 5 parts, the National Tech Plan. So the plan is actually 80 plus 90 some, I don't know how many pages long, pretty long. Somebody said it's a page turner. I don't know if that's true, but I turned a lot of pages looking at it. But there's an executive summary that's 12 pages or so, and then you can listen to this, which is about 5 minutes quick run through. There you go. You'll have the plan at the end of this. So there's 5 sections. The front and center, learning, we'll talk more about that. Teaching, absolutely important. Technology is not going to replace teachers in our lifetime. So teaching is absolutely something we need to think carefully about what that means. Assessment, equally important, and we'll talk about that. Those 3 things need to be wrapped with an infrastructure. What if we buy this model of learning that we'll talk about with learning and teaching and assessment kind of coming together in this new model of learning, then what's the infrastructure that needs to be in place? And we'll talk about that. And then finally, productivity. Productivity means if we're going to get way more students over a way higher bar, how are we going to do that? We need to get way more cost efficient and productive about our education systems. And finally, there was a big articulation about, so we need much better research and development in our education system. We don't do enough R&D, specifically in education. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're getting at that. So the learning section of the plan, and I'll kind of run through just the top line bullets. First of all, absolutely focused on teaching what matters. We looked at 21st century expertise. How do professionals use technology every single day? Accountants, biologists, auto mechanics. Pretty much everybody across the board uses technology in their work to get their work done. And so when we think about education, education's a knowledge industry, right? We need to use technology every day to get this work done, to do the work of teaching and learning. So we need to focus on 21st century expertise, first of all. And the second thing is we were really lucky and strategic before my time putting together this technical working group that helped us with the National Education Technology Plan. So one of the most important parts was it's very grounded in the cognitive sciences, how people learn, how do people with disabilities learn, how do people that need to learn language learn, what is the importance of affect, what's the importance of motivation. These are the kinds of things that were incredibly important in crafting this plan. And the fact that the plan is tied to the ground with reality and research is really important. So although it sometimes seems like a lofty vision, it's really absolutely tied to the ground, practical, and real. We didn't make stuff up. So as we think about how people learn, the importance of motivation and affect, that is the opportunity now to create and to bring in that long tail of personalization, personalized learning. And I have a full slide on personalized learning, so I'm going to leave that for right now. Universal design for learning, this is how we think about all students being able to have those accommodations out of the box instead of having to figure them out on the back end. So the easiest way to think about this is if you think about the sidewalk cutouts, right? Those were created and legislated. You need to have sidewalk cutouts for wheelchairs, right? It's an accommodation that's incredibly critical for people in wheelchairs. Well, it turns out it's also really helpful for people on bicycles or with strollers or all sorts of other reasons. So when you think about content online or using digital text even, just simply thinking about text, as my friends at CAST like to say, it's not the person that's print disabled, the print is disabled. The print just sits there, it's disabled, it can't do anything. Put the print online using technology, it can read to you, it can define its words, it can help you see a picture of something, it can give you some context. The print, once you bring it online and create a new way of presenting this content, much more enabled. So that's helpful for people who are blind if the text can read to you, but guess what? It's also really helpful for people who are learning language, people who are trying to learn new content, a medical student that has tough content, maybe they're tired, if they can have this read to them as they're going through it, really helpful for learning. So this universal design for learning has to do with creating these accommodations right out of the box. Informal learning. We know now that there is this great opportunity to really think about how to leverage the things students are doing outside of school, inside of school. And this isn't just the sort of, sort of high-end science camps and music instruction and sports and those kinds of things, although that's really important. And in the productivity realm, by the way, we need to figure out how to way better leverage that for thinking about what students are doing inside of school. But we also can leverage the connection to mentors, to parents, to all the different people working with students. The opportunity now with technology is that we can create a much more connected environment, much more connected, connecting students' informal life with their formal learning life. So let's talk about assessment. So one of the really interesting things, and I'm sure all of you know about this, but I want to put it in the context of this plan. Really important project is the $320 million that are going to build Assessment 2.0, the new generation of assessments. And when Secretary Duncan talked about this when he launched this, he said, this is incredibly exciting. We will not be relegated to just those things that can be tested on a bubble test. That's been a big problem. We have the standards and we have the testable standards, because the testable standards are those things that can be kind of boiled down to, answering something on a bubble test. Those are the things that we actually hold people accountable for. But what we want to do is create a whole new generation of assessments that include things like speaking and listening, critical thinking, creativity, all those things in the standards. We need to come up with better ways of assessing those. So when we talk about assessment, though, it's not just the big summative assessment at the end. There are other things that we can do. So first of all, we do need to measure what matters, measure the full range of assessments, as I said. The second, though, is the opportunity to have assessments embedded in the learning environment every single day, right? So as students go through their day, every day there should be a little bit of assessment. Assessment equals feedback. Feedback equals data. Data equals information. Information that is incredibly useful to the learner, to the teacher, to the parent. How do we increase feedback loops? In a predominantly print-based environment, we are pretty much relegated to the parent or the teacher or some adult giving students feedback. If we leverage the best of technology tools, there is plenty that we can do with technology that can adapt to students' needs, that can provide them the next things that they need. We can create these assessments that are embedded in the learning environment and adjusting as we go. Real-time feedback, obviously, and the opportunity to kind of keep a persistent learning record. If a student is responsible for their own learning record, how can we create an environment where a student or a parent has access or maintains their own persistent learning record wherever they go, from one school district to another, from one school to another, from what teacher to another, the student maintains this persistent learning record. Universal design is again important in the assessment space, and the new assessments that will be created with universal design accommodations built in at the front end, so we don't have to retrofit at the back end. And finally, the purpose of this entire assessment is for continuous improvement. Improvement for the student, for how they're learning, improvement for the teacher, improvement for the system, improvement for how we think about what we're funding. All of this data needs to be turned into the best information for continuous improvement. So teaching. As we said, technology does not replace teachers. It's not going to replace teachers. So how do we think about technology and teaching? What technology will do, it will do the same thing that technology has done in every other profession. It augments human performance. It amplifies our abilities. It provides the instrumentation. So we have, again, that information that we need to meet the needs of every single one of our students every single day. We want every teacher to be as highly effective as possible. So how do we augment human performance? Every teacher, giving them the materials they need. We want them to be highly connected. Connected to the data, to the tools, to the content, to the resources, to the information. We want them to be connected to their peers in communities of practice. We want them to be connected to experts that they need. As we think about teaching, and teachers, as you all know, increase their repertoire year after year after year. A new class of kids, new individuals, they have a new student 10 years into teaching that has some learning disability or something going on that they haven't come up against before. So how does that teacher access a learning network or a cadre of experts or somebody who knows about this? We want teachers to be as highly connected as possible to all the tools and resources they need to do their job. If you think about airline pilots, for example, they could fly on autopilot, as we saw when the guy landed on the Hudson River, right? Isn't it Hudson River? But we really don't want them to every day, right? We want the best instrumentation for pilots, for our military personnel, for biologists, for whoever is doing work. We want them to have the best tools at their disposal. And we have never said those things will replace, well, I guess we have in some cases. Technology has replaced some of the work, but it requires higher level thinking. A lot of people say, so how are we going to train a generation of online teachers? And I think I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think we need to think about it a little bit differently. I think what we need to figure out is, what does the differentiated teaching profession look like? So some people will be that content expert in the sky, creating the courses, providing the materials, providing the best lectures, information, simulations, all of those kinds of things. Right? So we'll have those people, and we'll have people in the classrooms that are incredibly good at motivating students, getting them to think about things, teachers who can roll up their sleeves and solve problems right alongside students. We'll have a lot of differentiated teaching profession. So I think for all of these, we need to figure out how to do competency-based learning and then measure the performance of all of the different kinds of people based on how well students are doing as a result of their work. So that's a big conversation, probably not one that we need to get into today, but definitely something to think about in terms of differentiated learning. Informal and formal, again, some people will be teaching students outside of school, some people will be tutors, some people will be online, some people will be providing help for families, lots of different kinds of things, and again, the opportunity to connect our teachers in classrooms with the other people in the student's life. And then finally, we want a generation of teachers. We want to inspire. We want to get a great group of people to join the teaching profession. And I do believe that in order to do that, we need a teaching profession that is highly connected, highly instrumented, teachers who have the best possible tools and resources at their fingertips every single day. That's the way we're going to inspire a generation of teachers to be highly effective and to want to be in classrooms with students, because they have every opportunity to be incredibly successful. So That's all well and good, right? So we have the teaching, learning, assessment model of learning, the model that we're talking about. That's the kind of elevator pitch, really tall building, elevator pitch about what's going on in the technology plan, how learning can be powered up by technology. So what's the infrastructure that needs to be in place? We need 24/7, community-wide, broadband everywhere, devices for everyone. Every student and teacher needs a device 24/7 so they can do their work every single day. It needs to be highly supported. And when I say supported, one of the things we have to figure out is how students and teachers will be able to support themselves, right? We need a highly supported system. And so to do that, we need the ownership, the feel of ownership, whether it's a financial ownership or not, the feel of ownership has to be as close to the end user as possible. So we need this supported system. And we can talk more about that if people are interested in that. And then equity. Again, we say every student and teacher, and we mean every student and teacher, regardless of where they are. If they're in underserved areas of our cities, if they're in low population density areas in our rural and frontier lands, every student everywhere needs the opportunity to have the best possible education. And then productivity. We'll just run through this. Basically, we need better processes, better cost efficiency. We need financial systems that actually can connect inputs and outputs. We need to redesign our processes so that they're more efficient. The last part of the plan was on research and development. We really thought about what needs to be invented in order to bring all this to life. So there's a lot of things that are already there. But then there are these things that need to be invented, or we also need to think about things like technology transfer. What are the things happening in other agencies and other entities that we can bring in? And we can talk about this in terms of personalized learning, because I think there's a lot we can think about from the consumer space when we think about this. Department of Defense is doing an amazing amount of work with intelligent tutors and these environments, these simulated environments where students are having much better success in a shorter amount of time. So the grand challenges that we talk about in the plan articulate some of the ones that we thought of, but there are many more, and the opportunity is now for the people who make products to really pull out the stops. Think way more carefully about the kinds of things that they are creating. And again, we will be supported as we move from a predominantly print-based environment. So if you think about all those people now really spending all their time and money creating the best possible print-based tools and resources, if all that effort is now augmented by the technology tools that can buoy that up, we would have some amazing products and things to put into our schools. So let's just focus in 1 minute on personalized learning, and then we'll open this up for discussion. So I just want to do a little defining about personalized learning, because a lot of people have different notions of this. So as we went through the plan, here's how we thought about it. We thought individualized learning that we've been talking about for years is, here's the bucket of stuff everybody needs to learn, right? Here are the standards, here's the scope and sequence. Everybody needs to learn this stuff. So we're going to individualize. That means you can go at your own pace, right? You individualize, you help them learn that stuff at their own pace. Differentiated learning kind of brings in the notion of the same thing, but using different kinds of tools, different learning styles, different methodologies that are successful with different students. Personalized learning is yes and, right? We want to individualize, we want to differentiate, and we can personalize. We can bring in student interest. When we have access to the internet, we can leverage all sorts of other things that maybe 2 or 3 students are interested in. Maybe those are the things that will bring them in, that will incent them, entice them. Personalized learning means that we can provide them with the content, with the examples, with the kinds of things that have a chance of really engaging them. So we're really figuring out how personalized learning can create a more interesting, engaging, personal learning environment. And again, if we think about learning and devices and students having their environment, that's where they can keep their own writing, their own music, their own presentations, their own projects. All of their work can be contained. That's a personal thing. We can really develop this notion of each student as a learner. So we don't really need to talk more about this. The notion that learning is incredibly participatory and social. It's a social act. It's also a reflective act. But we want to make sure, as we talk about personalized learning, that people don't get the visual of kids plugged in. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the opportunity to help kids work with other students, work with people that might not be in their geography or whatever. Learning is playful. The opportunity to use games, and we know games are personalized because students get incredibly invested, adults get incredibly invested. I was just reading the core demographic for those games on Facebook are 43-year-old women, I think, something like that, right? Buying virtual flowers and things that you can't really do much with. Learning is playful. And as we talked already about, it augments human performance. So this notion from the consumer space about hyper-personalization is really interesting, right? I was at this conference where I was listening to people from Zynga. They're the people that do the Farmville and Mafia Wars and the games on Facebook. So how they're thinking about personalizing the space. Folks from Facebook, folks from a company called Zobni that's doing this work on cataloging your entire hard drive. So it can, if you hit J, it says, oh, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you have a meeting with John, I see on your calendar, and John is this person who's, over here, and here's the phone number. And I mean, the way they were talking about how they can use really powerful computer algorithms to way better personalize search results for you, personalize what you see on the sides of your screens, the advertisements. You go look at a Lexus online, and suddenly all your advertisements are looking like Lexuses. You see a lot of them. That's because they have amazing algorithms that are getting closer and closer to you. If we could leverage, not the advertising part of it, but the algorithms that they've figured out to personalize what they provide to you, that would be amazing. So I've been talking to some of the companies saying you need to hire computer scientists, not just psychometricians. Psychometricians, yes, smart and helpful, but also computer scientists. How many people saw the movie Social Network yet? Anybody see it? A couple of you? So there's this one great scene where it's like, I need that algorithm, and they're like, and they write it on the window, right? And that was kind of the beginning of Facebook. It's really interesting. So when you think about these, the brilliance of computer algorithms, we haven't really gone to there in education yet. Okay, and then I think we'll stop there. So, jump to there. So we're going to go ahead and jump to conversation, and you're going to join me on stage.
Hello, my name is Kevin Bushweller. I'm executive editor of Education Week Digital Directions. And as Karen said, we want to turn this into a very interactive session. And so we'd love to hear questions from the audience starting now. I have plenty of my own questions, but we'd like to hear from you. Is there anyone out there who has a question they'd like to ask right now? Okay, then I'm going to start with
there was,
right over here, right over there. Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is on. Oh, it is. Tell me your name and what organization. Sure. My name is Janie Schall. I'm from St. Hope Leadership Academy in New York. And my question is, I feel like right now the technology has really far outpaced the capabilities of the schools themselves to utilize them optimally. So I'm just wondering, like in terms of my school, I feel like in terms of teacher training, in terms of infrastructure, we're not really at the point where we are able to have, broadband. Well, we have broadband, but we don't have a laptop for every child. And, we have smart boards and clickers and all these things, but they're not really being utilized to full effect. I'm just wondering, what do you think needs to happen in order for technology to be optimally used in schools?
I think the first, I mean, there are a lot of things, but two things. We need a direct-to-student model. So we need to put it in the hands of students as learners. The second thing is we need to stop saying that teachers need a ton of professional development to do this. I'm not underplaying the fact that they do, but one of the things that I hear over and over is teachers don't know how to use technology. Well, we know that the demographics now are telling us there are tons of 40 to 60-year-old females who are on Facebook, shopping online, joining Living Social and the Guilt Group and all sorts of other places. There is a lot going on online for learners and people of all ages. So we need to stop saying that teachers can't do this. So that's one thing. Second thing, coupled with that, if a product is so complex that it needs a ton of professional development to use it, I'm not saying to incorporate it, but just to click and figure out how to navigate, it's too complex and it needs to be redesigned. I really think that. Because so many products now are just, you can get in and you can figure out what to do. So user interface needs to be paid attention to. But I think this notion of direct to student is, even if teachers did pretty much the same thing that they're doing now, students could do even just the basics, right? They can research online, they can do their writing, they can do math and computation, they can use spreadsheets, they can publish, they can use media, they can incorporate music. There is a lot that students can do that does not require an intensive amount of professional development. So I think in a way we have sort of thought we needed to completely change our environment in order to incorporate technology, but I think what we really need to do is almost like downplay all of that and say, here, you need this to learn. You need this to do your work. Here you go. Here's the tool of the day.
Anyone else have a question out there? I have a question. We wrote about this recently. School districts allowing students to use their own mobile devices for learning. And when we were talking before your presentation, you talked about schools doing more with what they have. And students come to school every day now with, carrying a smartphone, a cell phone, a netbook, all kinds of devices. What policy changes do you think states and districts need to put in place to be able to use those devices for learning?
Yeah, so there are some school districts that are leading this effort because policy changes do need to be carefully considered in order to leverage student-owned devices. I 100% think we need to leverage student-owned devices. I think there are many, many students who have them, and if we're waiting to have enough money for the school to hand something to every student, I think we need to leverage all the different opportunities we have. In some cases, it's student-owned devices. It might be a sliding scale-owned device. I think there are a lot of different ways to think about this. The policies, we need to make sure that networks have the proper filters. We need to make sure the filters are on the network. There are a lot of things that we need to figure out, but there are definitely schools and districts that have supported this. Just a really simple example, there was a principal, I was on a panel with a principal recently, and he had taken over an 8th grade class in his school, and it was a math class. And as part of the thing, he was like, let's get out the calculators. And so they were doing something with calculators. They were a few short or something like that. So he pulls out his cell phone out of his pocket and he hands it to a kid. He goes, you can use this. And the kid goes, I have one of those. And he's like, where is it? It's in my locker. We have to shut him down and leave him in our locker during school. And the principal was like, huh. And so he said, how many of you have calculators on your phones in your lockers? And almost all the kids had them, right? So it was this aha moment that what they decided to do was work with the students and kind of wander down this path together. They said, okay, students, we're going to figure out with you how we can use these things. And what they first had to do, by the way, is they had to have the students, the first assignment, go home and figure out what your cell phone plan is. Because they didn't want to, kids start texting each other and using all this stuff, and then the parents are like, wait, why is this bill so high? And so that was a great learning. He said that was one of the best math projects and learning and opportunities for the parents and the kids all together. So he said that was where we started. And so now they've little by little figured out the different things that they can do with the student-owned devices.
Well, and that raises a question. Raise your hand if your district currently bans the use of cell phones in schools.
Yeah, for good reason. Yeah.
Right. Raises a good question about how to work your way through these types of things.
Yeah.
And what steps you need to take to, to get there so that the devices can be used effectively for learning?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I think about this a lot because there was the professor, I can't remember where, some college that basically banned all technology in his classroom. He said no technology at all, which I think that's fine. That doesn't mean those students will never use technology to learn again in their lives. It means in my classroom, here's how I want to do my classroom. That's fine. It's his classroom, and he knows what he needs the students to accomplish, right? So that's okay. But what I think is like the ship has sailed, horses left the barn, whatever the metaphor is that you want to use, to think about the fact that we need to figure out how to engage students. If the reason that we're having these things put away in lockers and other places are because we're worried that they're going to be using them when they're supposed to be doing something else, then we need to figure out how to engage students. And I'm the first one to say how easy it is to get distracted with the next thing going on your screen, or an email comes in or whatever. But it's reality, and we do need to figure out how to help students get stuff done, accomplish what they need to accomplish in the midst of the distractions, and really start learning how to manage the environment that we're in.
The mic is coming your way.
I'm Sean Gross with Project Connect. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Sean.
So I want to merge actually the past two questions that came forth. We work on a project, and I'll be speaking on a panel later on this afternoon about the use of mobile phones in the classroom. And what we found in particular, when student-owned cell phones come into play, the teachers have to modify their instructional strategies. The instructional strategies are more focused upon project-based learning. Mm-hmm. We found that the teachers that are coming straight out of college are the ones that are having the most difficulty integrating social networking technologies, and also having difficulty in an instructional context, integrating project-based learning. So my question really is, what can the U.S. Department of Education do, or from a policy perspective, to help starting to transform these colleges of education to better prepare these teachers that are coming in to these schools, not recognizing how to adopt an approach like project-based learning that obviously makes the experience much more personalized for the student?
Yeah, great question, and we've been spending a lot of time, or I've been spending a lot of time with folks in colleges of education trying to figure that out, really. And Kyle Peck from Penn State says teachers have 15,000 hours of muscle memory of what it's like to be a learner when they go into the teaching environment. And so that makes us think that in college, we need to figure out, for people who are going to be teachers, how to create those experiences for them so they feel what it's like to be a learner in a project-based environment. And really, learn how to learn that way so that when they start working with their students, they can do that. The other thing that I think is projects I was talking to some folks from New Tech High, and they said they spend something like 40 hours or something crafting a project. And I think one of the things that's also happening is it's because teachers are doing all the work. They were not only crafting the project and the assignment, they were finding all the resources, finding all the web links, putting this stuff together. They were creating a scenario, right, that kind of set up the project. And it's kind of like, okay, well, if somebody creates a scenario, could you put that online so the rest of the world can use that? We don't need to keep recreating the wheel one classroom at a time. So one of the things we're working on is this online communities of practice space. And one of the things that we want to do is begin to create kind of an assignment registry, right? What are the most compelling assignments that you're doing with your students? And then get the students to do the work. So the students start coming up with the web links. The students start coming up with the questions that frame the project. I mean, there are things that we can do to create an environment, but getting the work closer to the student requires the student to have a device, requires the student to be enabled to do that work. So that's a couple thoughts, but the great question. It's definitely front and center in a lot of people's minds.
Any other questions out there in the audience? I'd like to end with one question. We've written quite a bit in Education Week recently about the use of online course taking to tailor learning to students' strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. It's growing fast, but it's still a very small percentage, of schools that are using it. How do you think, what do schools, districts, and need to do to scale it up so every district in the country is giving their students access to online courses that they wouldn't otherwise have?
Yes. I mean, again, I think it's the same kinds of things. I think it's that students need access, number one. Number two, there's this whole kind of movement on open education resources. And so there are, a couple of things. There are the opportunity to not think about online learning as just an other thing, like an outside of school thing. You can have an amazing environment online and then have a physical bricks and mortar classroom with a teacher. So the teacher is engaging the students, rolling up their sleeves along with the students. Take a subject like computer science, and we've kind of done some design work around this. Since computer science doesn't necessarily have textbooks and kind of it's not something that people have figured out how to do, we could create this environment online. And so they may have, the teacher in the classroom might be a math teacher that has never taught computer science. But here are all the materials. It's a direct-to-student model. Here's how we're engaging the students. Here are the assignments. Here are the interactives, the Scratch and eToys and these things that have been created in amazing places. You have this environment where students can go to access the course. But the adult and the teacher is really important. And the teacher, we want to be connected in a community of practice with other people, also in classrooms with students teaching this course. And we want them also connected to the experts. We've had more people from colleges and universities and from corporations telling us we need more computer scientists. We'll help. What can we do? We could create a community of experts that can also engage with students. So I think that I think it's not going to be a brick and mortar or online or even kind of a combination of the two. I think we're going to see a mashup, this kind of notion of a blended learning approach. So students have access to this online environment, and they may or may not have their teacher physically there. Teacher might be in the cloud. You might have both. You might, so it's going to be a kind of a blended hybrid situation.
Excellent. Please give Karen a hand. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to now kick off our first panel of the day, Building a Successful District E-Learning Program.